Philosophical Thoughts. 99. First and Second Things. First published as Notes on the Way in Time and Tide, Volume 23, 27th of June 1942, this essay was reproduced in Undeceptions, 1971, and First and Second Things, 1985, and is now in Compelling Reason, 1998. When I read in Time and Tide on the 6th of June 1942 that the Germans have selected Hagen in preference to Siegfried as their national hero, I could have laughed out loud for pleasure. For I am a romantic person who has frankly revelled in my Nibelungs, and specially in Wagner's version of the story, ever since one golden summer in adolescence when I first heard The Ride of the Valkyries on a gramophone and saw Arthur Rackham's illustrations to The Ring. Even now, the very smell of those volumes can come over me with the poignancy of remembered calf love. It was, therefore, a bitter moment when the Nazis took over my treasure and made it part of their ideology. But now all is well. They have proved unable to digest it. They can retain it only by standing the story on its head and making one of the minor villains the hero. Doubtless the logic of their position will presently drive them further, and Alberich will be announced as the true personification of the Nordic spirit. In the meantime, they have given me back what they stole. The mention of the Nordic spirit reminds me that their attempted appropriation of the ring is only one instance of their larger attempt to appropriate the Nordic as a whole, and this larger attempt is equally ridiculous. What business have people who call might right to say they are worshippers of Odin? The whole point about Norse religion was that it alone of all mythologies told men to serve gods who were admittedly fighting with their backs to the wall and would certainly be defeated in the end. "I am off to die with Odin," said the rover in Stevenson's fable, thus proving that Stevenson understood something about the Nordic spirit which Germany has never been able to understand at all. The gods will fall. The wisdom of Odin, the humorous courage of Thor was something of a Yorkshireman, and the beauty of Balder will all be smashed eventually by the realpolitik of the stupid giants and misshapen trolls. But that does not in the least alter the allegiance of any free man. Hence, as we should expect, real Germanic poetry is all about heroic stands and fighting against hopeless odds. At this stage, it occurred to me that I had stumbled on a rather remarkable paradox. How is it that the only people in Europe who have tried to revive their pre-Christian mythology as a living faith should also be the people that shows itself incapable of understanding that mythology in its very rudiments? The retrogression would, in any case, be deplorable, just as it would be deplorable if a full-grown man reverted to the ethos of his preparatory school. But you would expect him at least to get the no-sneaking rule right, and to be quite clear that new boys ought not to put their hands in their pockets. To sacrifice the greater good for the less, and then not to get the lesser good after all, that is the surprising folly. To sell one's birthright for a mess of mythology, and then to get the mythology all wrong, how did they do it? For it is quite clear that I, who would rather paint my face bright blue with woad than suggest that there is a real Odin, am actually getting out of Odin all the good and all the fun that Odin can supply, while the Nazi Odinists are getting none of it. And yet, it seemed to me as I thought about it, this may not be such a paradox as it looks. Or at least, it is a paradox which turns up so often that a man ought by now to be accustomed to it. Other instances began to come to mind. Until quite modern times, I think until the time of the Romantics, nobody ever suggested that literature and the arts were an end in themselves. They belonged to the ornamental part of life. They provided innocent diversion, or else they refined our manners, or incited us to virtue, or glorified the gods. The great music had been written for masses, the great pictures painted to fill up a space on the wall of a noble patron's dining room, or to kindle devotion in a church. The great tragedies were produced either by religious poets in honor of Dionysus, or by commercial poets to entertain Londoners on half-holidays. It was only in the 19th century that we became aware of the full dignity of art. We began to take it seriously, as the Nazis take mythology seriously. But the result seems to have been a dislocation of the aesthetic life, in which little is left us but high-minded works which fewer and fewer people want to read or hear or see, and popular works of which both those who make them and those who enjoy them are half ashamed. Just like the Nazis, by valuing too highly a real but subordinate good, we have come near to losing that good itself. The longer I looked into it, the more I came to suspect that I was perceiving a universal law. On cause mieux quand on ne dit pas causons. The woman who makes a dog the center of her life loses, in the end, not only her human usefulness and dignity, but even the proper pleasure of dog-keeping. The man who makes alcohol his chief good loses not only his job, but his palate, and all power of enjoying the earlier and only pleasurable levels of intoxication. It is a glorious thing to feel for a moment or two that the whole meaning of the universe is summed up in one woman. Glorious, so long as other duties and pleasures keep tearing you away from her. But clear the decks, and so arrange your life, it is sometimes feasible that you will have nothing to do but contemplate her, and what happens? Of course, this law has been discovered before, but it will stand rediscovery. It may be stated as follows. Every preference of a small good to a great, or a partial good to a total good, involves the loss of the small or partial good for which the sacrifice was made. Apparently the world is made that way. If Esau really got the pottage in return for his birthright, Genesis 25, then Esau was a lucky exception. You can't get second things by putting them first. You can get second things only by putting first things first. From which it would follow that the question, what things are first, is of concern not only to philosophers, but to everyone. It is impossible, in this context, not to inquire what our own civilization has been putting first for the last 30 years. And the answer is plain. It has been putting itself first. To preserve civilization has been the great aim. The collapse of civilization, the great bugbear. A peace, a high standard of life, hygiene, transport, science, and amusement, all these, which are what we usually mean by civilization, have been our ends. It will be replied that our concern for civilization is very natural and very necessary, at a time when civilization is so imperiled. But how if the shoe is on the other foot? How if civilization has been imperiled precisely by the fact that we have all made civilization our summum bonum? Perhaps it can't be preserved in that way. Perhaps civilization will never be safe until we care for something else more than we care for it. The hypothesis has certain facts to support it. As far as peace, which is one ingredient in our idea of civilization, is concerned, I think many would now agree that a foreign policy dominated by a desire for peace is one of the many roads that lead to war. And was civilization ever seriously endangered until civilization became the exclusive aim of human activity? There is much rash idealization of past ages about, and I do not wish to encourage more of it. Our ancestors were cruel, lecherous, greedy, and stupid, like ourselves. But while they cared for other things more than for civilization, and they cared at different times for all sorts of things, for the will of God, for glory, for personal honor, for doctrinal purity, for justice, was civilization often in serious danger of disappearing? At least the suggestion is worth a thought. To be sure, if it were true that civilization will never be safe till it is put second, that immediately raises the question, second to what? What is the first thing? The only reply I can offer here is that if we do not know, then the first and only truly practical thing is to set about finding out.